Welcome to the NextGen Planners podcast. NextGen Planners is a financial planning community with a supportive membership that strives for inclusion and best practice throughout our profession and the industry. This podcast is designed to support your always learning mentality by gathering insights from inside and outside of financial services. So, sit back and enjoy.
Hello everybody and welcome to the NextGen Planners podcast. My name is Dan and I'm the Head of Community Experience here at NextGen Planners. And today I am delighted to be joined from London by Lesley Li from U Impact. How are you doing today, Lesley?
Amazing. Thank you for having me. Yes, hello from grey London, but yeah, I've got a brightened mood. So looking forward to this.
It's a bit unusual actually, because usually it's grey up where I am and sunny in London, but it's actually the opposite today because it's absolutely glorious where I am. And anyone who's watching will see the big streak of sunlight down the left-hand side of my face. So yeah, sorry to make you feel jealous, Lesley. But thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure it's a pleasure to have you on. You've done a session for us recently in the community as well. And I really love what you guys at U Impact are doing and the kind of values and the reason behind what you're doing as well. So we'll go into all of that today. But we always start with a question just to try to get to know the person a little bit more. So for anyone who doesn't know Lesley, she's the CEO of U Impact, which is a really cool sustainability tool. And she'll be able to explain it better than I can. Based in Berlin and London. But to kick things off, Lesley, can you just tell us a bit about what you get up to on a daily basis?
So at U Impact, first of all, we start with the mission, right? The mission, what we're trying to do is to mobilize people's capital, people's money towards sustainability. So we are B2B2C. So basically, we help the financial institutions to help their clients to start doing that. We're talking about people like you and me, people on the street, not necessarily have a lot of financial literacy or experience in investing. So that's the point. We're trying to empower them to become more confident and sustainable investors.
I think it's a really good point, actually. And it's something that we've talked about on the podcast before, is the fact that there isn't a shortage of investment options out there available to people. There certainly isn't. And the average investor or the average person, they don't really truly, and this is a problem in our profession, is that they really don't truly understand what investing actually means, or on a basic level. I mean, on the most part, that is. And then we're trying to also introduce something like sustainable investing on top of that, which again is just adding more options, more confusion. And again, that kind of takes us into a completely different realm of consumer understanding. So it's really, really good that you guys are actually trying to do this. And the context of why we're talking today is because you guys actually released a research paper. I think was it 2022 you released this paper? So it's pretty much hot off the press, very, very recent and modern. And you talked about this in a session that you did for our community as well, where in that paper you identified four, and this is what's really interesting, 4 investor behaviors and how these relate to sustainable investing. So just to kind of kick things off, to start the conversation on this, can you give us a quick summary of those 4 investor behaviors and what they mean in terms of sustainability?
Sure. So I just talk about the mission to mobilize as much capital as we can towards sustainability. So then we did this study trying to understand, why are people not doing it yet? Why are they not investing sustainably yet? You rightly pointed out there are twofolds, right? First of all, is about investing. And then we're adding on another axis here, which is another complication, which is sustainability. Then when we do our research, we realize actually those are the 2 biggest obstacles for people to get started. First of all, they're not yet a confident investor. And secondly, is the perception on sustainability is not mature enough yet. Therefore, with that 2 axes, if you imagine a 2x2, then we start getting 4 types of investors. So this is where we're trying to understand the behavior side. So if you think about when you try to help a different types of people, you need a different a set of tools to help them. That's the basis we're working with. So you have 4 types. First of all, they are the lowest level of sustainability awareness and confidence level. We call them the average Joes, the average. And then moving on to the ones starting to have the sustainability awareness. That's what we observed since the beginning of the pandemic. People are wanting more and more some exposure into the sustainable area for their money. However, have no idea where to start. We call them the overwhelmed. And then if we move to the other corner of the quadrant, you get the skeptics. We call them the skeptics. They already they have already a portfolio. They probably invested in stock, even cryptocurrency. The reason why we call them skeptics is because the maturity level on the awareness on sustainability is not there yet. So they display behaviors like, hey, I'm not a charity. I want money. I want return. And then the final part, the highest of the both axis will be the empowered. Those are the people have the higher maturity when it comes to understanding sustainability and already a investment when it comes to a confident investor. So that's the empowered. So those 4 types that we have come up with, and then which is the basis for forming the features, the nudges, behavioral nudges in our tool.
It's super duper interesting. I think we can all think of someone we know who fits into, maybe at least 3 out of 4 of those categories. Certainly the skeptics, we know plenty of them. I'm just trying to think, so that's fantastic that we've identified these kind of behavioral types that we've got. So there's 4 different, axes, but what's the point, and how does that lead us toward the mission of actually helping? Like, how do we use those behavior types to actually help those, and how do we, help them to strive towards that kind of top right axis, which is empowered?
Yeah. So that's where the fun starts. So basically, it's like the first step is gaining clarity. Why are people not doing it? Now we have these 4 types. Then if you think about it's like playing a game. You're trying to get to point B. Literally, it's like that. For the 4 types, we then design paths for them to become the empowered type. For example, for the average, which is the currently the lowest when it comes to sustainability awareness and investment confidence, and then we got to perhaps design a path for them to start getting some awareness and push towards the more confident side. Then it becomes to be empowered. And different ways that we can design the behavioral science part of the nudges to help them. And when it comes to the behavioral science, there are different types of nudges we can integrate. For example, there is a more logical part of the help. For example, revealing data, what kind of data that we can help to make decisions. And the other side is on emotional, the psychological part. If we start with the logical, I'll give you an example. Like you're saying, you rightly observed, the majority, a lot of them, a lot of skepticism in the market. Say, oh, it's not earning money. Actually, we did this experiment. We only took the skeptical group of users. And then we say, okay, you're skeptical about the return. Sure. Then we loaded our tool with a range of products. So with various different levels of historic return, as well as sustainability preferences. Basically, almost 100% of them start choosing the more sustainable option when they have the tool and the data to find the ones with comparable historic return and with a higher level of sustainability. So that is the power of applying the right nudges to different types of investors. And then we did a retrospect interview to the interviewees, the skeptical people. They were very surprised. However, all of us, it also thought, actually, this is there's no brainer. If you have options. There are a lot of options out there. It's all about finding the ones with a good comparable return and with a higher sustainability level. Simple as that.
Well, it's fantastic, and it just shows the power of personalization is we can be more personalized on a scalable level nowadays, and this is kind of that exemplified, because you are personalizing that journey completely and taking down people down different paths depending on their attitudes and behaviors, which is something we should all be striving for.
That's right. There's one more point, is that we talked about the force type, the empowered type. What is dangerous is that, all right, you lead people to be the empowered. They start investing sustainably, but you don't keep them there. And then they would then fall back to the overwhelmed or the skeptic if the information is not communicated properly, if the products are not selected properly or presented properly. So that is also you converted them successfully, but you got to retain them for the long term. So that's theory behind it.
Yeah, and there is a lot more nuance to it, of course, as well. That I know that you guys use, for instance, and are supported by the UN SDGs, which, for anyone who in the audience who hasn't heard of them before, that's United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I think how old are they now? They're in their 20s now. I think they're getting on a bit, but they're still really, really cool ideas. And what your tool does, which I really like as well, is it kind of identifies those different SDGs and gives people the option to choose which are most important to them and how that aligns with their sustainable investing options as well. Which again comes into it. It's not just down to attitude and behavior of, those 4 behavior types. It also depends on what your own values are and what you really value. Because, for some people, for instance, life below water will not be up there, but education for all will be up there with one of their strong values. So it's about understanding their different values and how their sustainable investing options align to them as well.
That's right. And also SDG is one way of communicating that. There are various different ways that the methodologies can be adopted for that communication with the end investors, in particular retail. That is also something we're constantly testing. What would be the most optimal way to communicate the values, the sustainability to the people who have no idea about the topic? So it's really about evolving constantly, treating the whole process as an A/B testing, and then see what works the most optimal way.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to that. Just like everything in our industry, profession, whatever you want to call it, it comes down to the language that we use as well. We can't even agree really on how to refer to this kind of stuff. As if you say sustainable investing, people get annoyed because sustainable investing is a type of investing. If you say ESG investing, people get annoyed because that's just part of everything. If you say impact investing, then that is usually considered the dark green area. And then we get into colours, and then we get into the spectrum of capital. And it's like, we don't really truly understand all of the options out there. How on earth are the end investors going to also understand?
Exactly.
It's so just like we're trying to do with shall we say traditional in quotation marks investing, which is the non-sustainable or less sustainable types. Again, I'm getting it wrong here by the terminology I'm using, but if we're trying to educate them on that, use those same techniques that have worked well in that area to also apply to the sustainable investing side as well. Something that comes into this, and it's really, really a trending topic in our profession at the moment, and lots of people are talking about it, lots of people are doing great work on it, is the psychology, so financial psychology of everything. Because, I've seen some people being a bit skeptical about this as well and saying that financial planners shouldn't be psychologists. I don't agree with that at all. I think a lot of what financial planning is managing behaviors and ensuring people don't make mistakes, which comes down to behavior and attitude and education. So a lot of this comes down to biases as well. And, when it comes to investing, there's so many biases that investors have, but also it extends to that sustainable side as well. So when you think of those end clients, because you mentioned that you're B2B2C, what particular biases do you see those clients who are, in this area? What kind of biases are they facing when it comes to this type of investing?
Biases. You hear biases all the time. And that is exactly why we established this framework, which goes into the different types of investors, because there is no one size fits all. Same for biases. Different types of investors, the level of sophistication when it comes to their investment experiences or understandings, and education level, and all of that, they're different. That's why the starting point when it comes to identify the biases would be coming from different types, right? We start with the different types of investors we talked about just now. When it comes to the average, right, a lot of that is actually psychological. It's not exactly just financial literacy. They have no idea what's going on, and they just haven't thought about it. And that's, that's the majority of the society. And these people, I mean, if they're not guided properly, it could be getting into a situation that they download a random app on whatever app you see, day trading apps on their phone. They started trading. They think they're investing. However, what they're doing is actually speculating. And then they get into something like a derivative, a CFD, which is not actually how a beginner should be starting trading. Then they get burned. They lose all of their money. They think, whoa, this is not what I expected. You see, when they're not guided properly, they would bounce back into the box, say, all right, I have no idea what I'm doing, and I'm not going to try again. So this is very, very a special quadrant that need a lot of guidance, the right guidance, having the right mindset to manage their money. And we move on. Let's move on to the skeptics. The skeptics are the people who have already done some investments. However, they're having this biases, say, I'm not charity. Sustainable investments, that's not my thing. I want my return. That's a myth, right? So there's so many options. Yes, there are sustainable investments which lose money, just like any other investment options. It's about understanding what is in that type of sustainable investment. What is the actual type of it? Like you were saying, there's a whole spectrum of it. So there's a huge gap in there to draw the quick conclusion by reading the press, knowing or listening to people around you talk about all this greenwashing or the biases from all different directions without having the basis, which is the awareness and understanding of it. And then if I give you another example, the overwhelmed type is very, very interesting. From our research, we actually realized there are a lot of ladies in that quadrant. So they since the beginning of the pandemic, they think, right, I want to put my money into sustainability, but what is sustainability? I have no idea what it is. I have no idea where to start. Although I really, really feel strongly I want to put my money in there. The bias is that, investing is so scary, so complicated. And like you're saying, and sustainable investing, that's like another, if they know it's like 0.5 times 0.5 is 0.25, there's even smaller. That really diminishing this the willingness to get started. So if we start, to summarize, try to understand different types of investors, their fears, their biases, not just on a technical level, but on a psychological level. I thought that would be a really good starting point to start addressing, say, the lower hanging fruit, the quick wins.
Yeah. And I think this is kind of what we've been missing for ages, because we profile people in our profession a lot of the time based on their risk or their attitude to risk. And don't get me wrong, risk is a massive part of it, but that doesn't assess their ultimate overall behavior or their values or the way they feel or anything like that. It just assesses their attitude to risk and, maybe their need to take risks and their capacity for loss and that kind of stuff. Whereas it doesn't actually look at this kind of elements of what the different psychology and the biases behind this. So yeah, completely agree with that. And your kind of we talked a little bit about this before, about the education, and that financial literacy is just one part of it, but psychology is also part of it as well. But like, other than your tool, for instance, how can we kind of educate? I guess it starts with psychology, but how can we educate people on the different options available to them, to like when they want to invest sustainably, and if they want to invest sustainably, for instance?
So I think when it comes to the education, especially if we talk about the newer generation, the millennials, the Gen Z, the education, we have to understand that word in a more creative way. We use a lot of techniques, for example, gamification, to start addressing this financial literacy issue or sustainable financial literacy issue in different ways. And we thought that when it comes to that, it has to take several steps. It's not you can achieve that in one go. And when it comes to education, first step, you got to have the awareness on the topic and start basing on the different types of investors we're looking at. Start addressing that in the psychological biases. A lot of that come from fear, this overwhelming feeling, and also on the literacy side. And also, people need to understand that you don't have to be a financial expert to start doing investments. And then when it comes to investments, it's about the right starting point as well. For a person without too much of experience, actually, the right thing to do is probably not a stock pick. It narrows down the possibility that they should start getting into the area. It's about showing them that some examples that they can get started with. For example, funds. Funds is a good idea to get started. And also showing the pathway, give them some of the basic understanding on the market involvement. Volatility is okay. And look at the longer horizon when it comes to the market involvement. It's about understanding investment rather than speculate.
Yeah, this comes exactly into what we were talking about earlier, doesn't it? Is this kind of general feeling of apathy towards investing by people, not just in the UK but around the world, where it's like there's an analogy which is, if your pipe's broken in your bathroom, it makes no sense to clean up the water first. You've got to stop the pipe from leaking first. And it's a bit like this with it. It's a terrible analogy, by the way, everyone in the audience, but it's a bit like this with sustainable investing. If they don't understand the basics of investing anyways, trying to go at them with, by the way, you can also invest to do good with your money and that kind of stuff, that it just doesn't work that way. It's backwards. We should start, like, I completely agree with you. You've got to start with teaching people the basics of investing first, before telling them, or whilst also telling them that you can also invest sustainably and to do good with your money. And I guess that kind of comes into what you were just saying there about the difference between stocks and funds and that kind of stuff. Most people don't have an understanding of that. They just kind of put it all into one category. And if we also then include sustainable investing into that category, that's just going to confuse them even more.
That's right. And also, I mean, when it comes to whose responsibility is it to do that? I mean, especially the young generation, there's still a lot of reliance on the traditional sector. But as far as we understand, there hasn't been a big help or push from promoting that yet. And that's actually what we're trying to do. We work with financial institutions. We say, we can't just rely on how the industry evolves as it is. Let's push them to move faster towards the way that young people actually need.
Yeah, I want to push you on something before that you said about your mission. So your mission is obviously to empower people to change the world by investing money for good and that kind of stuff. I guess I want to go a little tiny bit deeper. Well, actually, quite a vast amount deeper, actually, and say why. What is the point of this? I mean, I'm playing devil's avocado here, by the way, or devil's advocate, however you want to refer to it, and saying, what is the point of green investing, and how much of an impact are we seeing it actually have on societies? I know, but for people in the audience, like what is the point of this whole green investing thing, and how much of an impact is it actually having?
So the word green investing is extremely
sustainable investing.
General.
Yeah.
Even that is very, very general, right? We gotta look at the spectrum, like you were saying, right? We have the brown stuff. You consider no sustainability at all, and then you get into the light green. So this is what people so-called DSG, the do no harm, and then you move gradually towards this dark green, making an impact. So that is, I mean, throughout the whole spectrum, the level of impact to the society or the level of impact to the companies underlying, they're different. So that's number one, the awareness for the society to understand what are the different types of availabilities, options available out there, and what are the implications of putting money into these areas. So awareness, number one, and then the understanding on the impact. Impact is also a confusing word, or creating a difference. And thirdly, is the involvement. This is what I actually think it gets very interesting, because when you say, okay, I put my money into a fund which is classified as sustainable, impact done, it's not that simple. If you think about what that is doing, I would actually say the overarching theme should be transparency. Transparency, that, I mean, it's not just a cliche everyone talks about. Think about what that gives people. That really empowers the people, everyone, to be the disciplinary force. Because now the financial products, having this transparency, the data, empowered for everyone to understand what is in there, that's powerful. What does that mean? That means now the society can start evolving into this capital market as a disciplinary factor. Say, I actually know what is in your financial product. What is that company doing in this so-called sustainable funds? That is powerful stuff. And then the fund managers or asset managers, the companies, the manufacturers for those products will say, okay, now we can't hide behind the system anymore. Now everyone, they're literally, these products are literally naked. They better do something meaningful when they construct a product to address a specific area. And that really does help by the current regulatory disclosure requirements. We very much welcome that. However, there is a gap there. Regulatory, for any of you who has read any piece of regulatory disclosure requirements, that is not English. That's basically gibberish. But what if there is a way we can translate all of that great stuff, great level of details, into a way that the general society would understand, and put that transparency really is required and standardization into the market? That will be powerful. Then that really becomes not a top-down approach, but bottom-up. It's a grassroots movement now. And every one of us will have the power to help with the transitional process, to help the whole society to transition into a more sustainable society.
Yeah. Wow, I've never thought of it that way, or framed a question in that way before, of thinking about it like that. Because the knock-on effects of what that does is that completely changes everyone's perspective towards finance and towards the markets and towards investing. Because one of the main issues with it is that it isn't transparent at the moment, or it hasn't been transparent for years, and that's one of the reasons why the reputation of finance is so low. But if you could, like you said, if I'm thinking of this kind of utopian world where, like you said, it's bottom up and everyone understands what they're investing in, everyone understands where their money's going, that would completely change. It would completely revolutionize the way we think about money and think about investing. And that's the way it should be if we think about it. It should be like that. I don't know why we've got into the comfortable way of thinking that this is some utopian world. That should just be the way it is.
That should be the way it is.
It's
I
just
mean,
not.
exactly. This is exactly what we're doing day and night at U Impact. We shout and dance and rap about that, and then that is something that we thought leverage what is already out there. Regulatory data is a great thing. There are a lot of ESG data out there, but now is really the time to bridge the gap and put that into perspective for the people who have no idea about any of this.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to ask you a question which I've kind of changed a little bit to how I usually ask. So I usually ask people, what do they think that the future of financial planning will look like over the next decade or so? But in your case, it would be a bit harsh to ask you that. So instead, I'm going to reframe it and ask you, if we could think about green investing, and I'm going to extend it out a little bit and say maybe 20 years time. And I say green investing, you know what I mean, basically sustainable investing, investing for good. How do you think that market and how do you think that area of investing will look in 20 years time? What will have changed, do you think?
I love that question because I remember the first time I was on stage pitching, there was someone asked me exactly that. And my answer is exactly the same as what I'm answering from back then. The reason why I'm into this topic is that I want this word sustainable investing to disappear. So in 20 years' time, I don't want anyone to talk about that anymore because it would have been an intrinsic process. And every single fund, it should be sustainable by default by then. There's already a consensus because of this transparency, because of this empowered grassroots bottom-up approach. And everyone has come to agreement that, well, this is the way how we should be putting our money. But of course, step number one is to put that transparency in place so that in 20 years' time, vision can happen. And it's a matter about, whether I want to allocate more of my money into social or which specific social area I want my money to be in. And it's 100% of my portfolio will be some sort of either environmentally or socially or in an economy way that is sustainable.
If anyone who's listening, by the way, they won't be able to see the big smile on your face and the kind of passion that you had when you were talking about that. People who are watching this on YouTube will be able to see, but people who are listening won't be able to. But it's true. It's such a kind of we've talked about this. I actually asked that question a few times to people and say, do you think that green or sustainable investing will become the default form of investing in years to come? And I've never really heard anyone give a clear answer as what you've just given there, which is a resounding yes. Like, you don't want this to be a kind of nuanced conversation. You don't want this to be a kind of extra on top of normal investing. You just want this to be, in quotation marks again, normal investing, default investing. And I'm on board with you there. Final question for you. We do always like to ask our guests for a book that has helped them in their career. I usually extend this out to, a podcast episode or an album or a film or something that has helped you. But people usually go for books. So, what would you recommend our audience consume to help them to continue to grow?
I would say The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. The reason why is because, I was in investment banking for a decade before. That infinite gain mindset is what triggered me to switch to my entrepreneurship right now. It's about a purpose-driven life that we were pursuing. When I was in investment banking, I wouldn't call that a very purpose-driven career on a broader level. However, it's really talking about how to transition your lifelong mission towards a infinite mindset, to always grow, to always think about what your ability, what your experience could project to the wider society to help people around you. So I would definitely recommend people to start having a look at that. I mean, technical books are great. However, for this, I will imagine it to be definitely a lot of a longer impact onto someone's life and someone else's life around you as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. I've never read that book, but I've listened to the blink of it, which basically gives me the 15 minutes summary of it. And yeah, I can guarantee that it does change the way you think about things. It definitely does. And I know that a lot of people in our community use that kind of mindset of being a little bit better every day and that kind of stuff. So on board with you with that one as well. Well, thank you so much, Lesley. We did have some technical issues towards the start of this podcast, so hopefully those are being ironed out. But if anyone was listening, and apologies for that, hopefully it actually figured itself out eventually. That's all from us today. We do like to give the last word to our guests to say a big thank you for coming on the show. So, Lesley, can you tell our audience how to find you, how to connect with you, and where to find more about You Impact as well?
You can find me on LinkedIn or reach out to me on an email. That's Lesley at youimpact.earth. So every one of you can make an impact on our earth. So Lesley at youimpact.earth.
Oh, I love
looking forward to hearing from you.
I hadn't even realized that kind of the imagery behind that URL. That's amazing. So yeah, youimpact.earth. Go check it out. Some amazing things there. But Lesley, a big thank you to you for coming on the show today. It's been lovely to chat with you. Thank you very much. So that was Lesley Li from You Impact on the Next Gen Planners podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can of course share it with people. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and on YouTube. And we are on social media on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok, of course. And we you can also find it on the Next Gen Planners website, which is nextgenplanners.co.uk. Unfortunately, not as exciting as Lesley's URL. Where you can find out more information about our amazing community of 1,000 financial service heroes. We've also got lots of different things to help you grow and be a better financial planner in there as well. And we do have a conference which is coming up in May and June this year. So go and check out tickets. That's nextgenplanners.co.uk/conference to go and check that out. And of course, I will just say, if you could leave us a review just to let us know if you've enjoyed this podcast, that really does help us to grow. But that's all from us today. So a big thank you once again to Lesley for joining us on the show. Thank you guys for listening as always, and we will see you in the next one. Bye bye.